Tyler Rowland, Locked On Titans, joins me to talk about whether or not the Titans are in business at the number one pick. We'll talk about it in just a moment here on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. And I talked about it yesterday, the possibility of the Browns maybe trading up to number one to get the quarterback of their dreams. But are the Titans even open for business? Tyler Rowland is here to talk about it with me from Locked On Titans. We'll get his thoughts on all these different things and different angles of how this thing could play out here in the next month and a half. But before we get there, I do want to thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. And remember, you will find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, plus bonus content on some weekends, plus a couple bonus episodes during the week sometimes as well. It's all free to you. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is you get your podcasts. And, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel to get where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. Tyler, I can't thank you enough, man. We got a chance to finally meet in person in Indianapolis, which was awesome. And you sort of joked, I know there's the big Locked On Browns mock draft show, or not Locked On Browns, Locked On mock draft show coming up. And you sort of threw my way, hey, number one picks open, but there's I'm listening to offers, and I kind of wrote it off and said there's no chance, but things have changed all of a sudden. So I appreciate you coming on with me today, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, our two teams up at the top of the draft, similar circumstances in a lot of ways, some differences, of course, in a lot of ways, but I think both teams are in a predicament of, do we take a chance on these quarterbacks, or do we look at the obviously talented defensive players and all the different things that these teams can do? It makes for some great content and great discussions. And I know it's tough to get here from a fan perspective with the season and the losing, but it is fun from a fan perspective to talk about all the different ways it can go.
No doubt about it. And I know you were able to joke with me over a dinner at Harry and Izzy's that you're open for business, but we're obviously doing this more for fun than the actual GMs of these two teams. So I do want to get your perspective on, as some new reports have come out, as we've heard more and more about Cam Ward separating himself as the top quarterback in this class. How open for business do you think the Titans are in potentially moving that number one pick?
I think they are 100% open for business. And I think while it's easy to make the argument, hey, the Titans need a quarterback, they don't have a quarterback, why don't they just take the quarterback? I know that would be the instant thing, but the reality is, I think, and there's some reporting around the Titans that suggest they feel this way as well. The Titans are just so far away. They're not a quarterback away. There are so many holes on this roster at premium positions that you have to have filled. The Titans, I think even the Browns, are much further along as a roster than the Titans are. So you could take a quarterback, but would that quarterback just fail because the supporting cast is so poor? I think the Titans are grappling with that right now. And because the answer to that question is most quarterbacks probably would fail in this scenario, we need to fill this roster out. I think trading down is the preferred option for the Titans right now, even with all the positive buzz about Cam Ward.
What is the sense that you get about the Titans' real interest in Cam Ward, though? Like, they obviously are considering a lot of the same players the Browns are considering right now. Cam Ward's up there, maybe Shedeur Sanders, although, like I said, there seems to be some separation now from him. Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter. Like, who do you think they legitimately have their eye on? Is it Cam Ward or is it someone else?
Listen, there again, you hear things. We were at the Combine, that it's constant whispers and things like that. I think that coming out of the Combine week, a lot of people around the team were like, hey, it's probably going to be Cam Ward or a trade back. But I got to be honest with you. I think that Abdul Carter is still the Titans' number one target. I don't buy that it's Cam Ward or a trade back. And here's why. It's a simple theory of, if you're willing to trade back and not take the quarterback, then I'm sorry you can't be that in love with him. Like, there is no price that could be paid to take me off someone who I think could be my franchise quarterback. The Bears wouldn't have taken 3 first-rounders to move off Caleb Williams. The Jaguars wouldn't have taken 3 first-rounders to move off Trevor Lawrence. The Bengals wouldn't have taken 3 first-rounders to move off Joe Burrow. So to me, there's a disconnect in logic. If you are so willing to trade down, which clearly the Titans are, that is confirmed, then you don't love Cam Ward enough to take him number one. It can't both be true. You can't love Cam Ward enough to take him number one and also at the same time be willing to move back. Like that just, quarterbacks are too valuable and too important. So that doesn't line up. So to me, I'm going to cut through the nonsense of this time period. I think the Titans still want Abdul Carter, and I think they would still prefer a trade down and aren't as enamored with Cam Ward as maybe they want people to think that they are.
I think that's a really good point by you. You know, if you're hearing these things, there's always a reason for that, right? Sometimes it's a smokescreen, but sometimes it's just truly how the team feels. I also am curious because I think one of the most interesting things about the Titans right now in the situation that they're in is that their GM and their coach are on different timelines right now. You have a GM in Mike Borgonzi who just got hired. Brian Callahan's going into year 2. So the sort of prevailing thought here is Brian Callahan probably wants the quarterback. He probably wants to find that guy. But Mike Borgonzi might be looking at the situation, like you said, saying, we got a lot of holes to fill here. I know that I'm not probably going to get fired after 1 year. Like, I'll be good. Like, I can sort of build this roster differently and then go get the quarterback. How much is that, you think, impacting the Titans' decision-making here at the top of the draft?
Well, I think it's something to monitor. And recently, A to Z Sports put out a report saying that Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans coaches are in on Sam Darnold, and they would like Sam Darnold, but also mentioned that, the front office maybe not so keen on doing that because, they're in different places, and it's the coach's job to want to win now, and it's the front office's job to want to win, sustainably in the future. But you're right. When you don't have your coach and your general manager hired together, tied at the hip, it can create some division. And while there may not be drama in the halls of Nashville right now for the Titans, it's fair to be like, well, if they're not 100% on the same page, that's probably not a good thing. But the reality is that Brian Callahan is going to coach what's given to him. The Titans hired Mike Borgonzi. They elevated Chad Brinker. I think those are the guys who get to make this decision, not Brian Callahan. His opinion will be taken into account, and it should be. But the guys who will make this call will be at the top of the draft. And at the end of the day, again, I just don't believe that they would put their job and stamp their job on Cam Ward right now. I think that Cam Ward is a good player, but I think that we change our mind sometime during this time of year where there's something that's known by everybody. The film is the film. Be a tape-driven team. Cam Ward was probably great in the meetings. I think he should go in the first round. I think he should go in the top 5 probably. But the Titans aren't in a position to take him, and I don't believe the reports that they love him but are also willing to trade down. There's just no way. And the rift between that, to me, leans towards the general manager, and he'll want more picks to build out the roster.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting too, because like your team's in a very different place than the team that I cover. The Browns have they have a GM and coach who are in lockstep. They're tied to each other, and their jobs are kind of on the line here. Like if they don't get
and they have less patience.
Yes, exactly. Like if they don't get this thing figured out now, they could be looking for jobs next offseason. So yeah, very different scenarios there. I'll wrap this part of the conversation up, and there is more to come here with Tyler. I'm glad he's sticking around for a second segment. But I'll wrap this part up with, okay, if it's not Cam Ward for the Titans, how do you think their quarterback situation gets sorted out or resolved this offseason?
I think they go the veteran route. I think Sam Darnold is on the table right now, although I wouldn't be too high on that move, depending on the price. I think Aaron Rodgers, it was reported Aaron Rodgers' second preferred destination is Tennessee. He owns a home in Nashville's area. I think that can make sense. I think really if Kirk Cousins is released by the Falcons, which I think will happen, I think that's who ends up as the Tennessee Titans quarterback. So I know he's not available yet, but I would say Sam Darnold number 1, Aaron Rodgers number 2, and Kirk Cousins number 3 for me.
Well, the Browns and Titans are just duking it out over everything. Maybe the top quarterback in the board, maybe Kirk Cousins, because that's a name that's been linked to Cleveland, obviously, as well, given his history with Kevin Stefanski. So this could just be a backyard brawl between these two teams for all the different quarterbacks that are out there. We will step aside here momentarily. Tyler's going to stick around because when we get back, I talked about this on Tuesday's show. Today, though, I have Tyler with me. I want to know what it's actually going to cost to move up to get that number 1 pick, because I think people have misconceptions about what it might actually take. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. You've probably heard of Chewy, and really, they have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet healthcare, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food and treats to toys, beds, and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth, vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. My mother-in-law's dog, Gracie, we treat her like she's our dog because we don't have one at our house. And whenever someone is ordering food for her, Chewy is where we go. It always arrives on time, and you can trust that it's some of the best food out there to keep her healthy and strong. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking on the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking on the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. All right, Tyler's sticking around for one more segment. Really excited to have him and bring some perspective to all these conversations about the Browns, the Titans, maybe trading places in the NFL draft. And Tyler, I took a lot of flack for talking about what the Browns might have to give up to get to number one. I want to know from your perspective what you think a package from 2 to 1 could potentially look like for the Browns, or even just maybe you just look at these top 3 teams. Like if it's the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, like what sort of package you think gets it done for any of those teams to sort of swap positions?
Well, I definitely think the Giants would cost more. I think when you're talking about the number 1 overall pick, every spot that you go back, I think there's a bigger increase in the price than maybe people would think. And I think that's how the Titans need to approach this. If you're looking at the Browns, I think for a 1-spot jump, it's appealing for the Titans because I think, in my mind, my opinion here is that they want Abdul Carter. They want Abdul Carter. That's the player they truly hope that they get. And they want to find a way, if they can, to get picks and get Abdul Carter. That is having your cake and eating it too. The problem is, I personally don't buy the smoke about quarterback from the Browns. I think the Browns will take Abdul Carter if they stick and pick at number 2. So if you're the Titans and you drop back to number 3, you probably don't get Abdul Carter. You probably got to take Travis Hunter right there. So dropping back to number 2 ensures that you get Abdul Carter because you know the Browns would only make that trade for a quarterback. You don't trade up otherwise. So I think doing that and dropping back 1 spot while also guaranteeing that you get the guy that you actually want, I think that's appealing, and that would make it cost less. Like the gap between what it would cost the Browns and Giants is huge because of the risk of losing Abdul Carter to the Browns at 2. So I think eliminating that risk makes it cheaper. I would say for the Giants, I need a first round this year, a first round next year, and then a day 2 pick from each of the next 2. Like this year, their second rounder, and then next year, their third rounder, or this year, their third rounder, next year, their second rounder, some combination there. With the Browns, I know that most Titans fans would want number 2, number 1 next year, and then a day 3 pick this year. I think that's what most Titans fans would want. But for me, I want to be more realistic than that. And when you look at what the Browns have available, I think if you got pick number 2 and then you paired that with pick number 33.
33, yeah. First one of the second round, which is, fringe first rounder. The Browns can sell it as a fringe first round pick. Exactly.
Exactly that. It's basically 2 first round picks, in my opinion, if you want to call it that. If they could give the Titans, I would say number 2, number 33, and 67, and I think it gets it done. But if the Browns don't want to give up all of their top 100 picks this year to make the move, I get that. I would do 2, 33, and a second round next year. And I think that would be my bare minimum. If you give me 2 and 33 and a second rounder next year, I would do that deal to move back 1 spot. I think that's fair market. That may be too much for Browns fans, but if you're the Titans, then I'm going to sell it to somebody who is willing to pay more, or I'm just going to stick and pick and take the guy that I want. But I think that's not too expensive for the Browns, and also a fair price for the Titans to say yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's the charts that sort of map out the general value of what these picks cost, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I saw there was something I was reading the other day about the average additional, because the first overall pick's worth like 3,000 points or whatever it is in the one
Yes.
chart, right? And so
Right.
the teams that are usually trading out of that spot, they're usually getting like an average of 3,000 points back in additional value, whether that's picks, whether that's
Exactly.
players. So
It's not even. That's
Right,
that's a
right.
misconception that people have, that these trades are to be even. If you look
Exactly.
at previous trades, Spot Track or Jason, I forget his last name, but Over the Cap is a salary cap website that's very popular. I know you're aware of it, Spencer. Your fans maybe not aware of it, but Over the Cap is a great website, and the guy who runs that site did an article this week about previous big trades like this at the top.
I think we read
and
the same article,
average. The average that teams are getting back is a plus 3,000 win for the team that's number one. So you're 100% right about that. It's not meant to be even.
Yeah, and that's the key thing here. Like, I bring up that the Browns may have to throw their first rounder in next year, and Browns fans lose their mind and go ballistic. But like, sometimes that's like, the deal is the deal, right? Like, if you're giving up a potential franchise quarterback and you know that's what that team wants, you pay a premium on that. And the other part of this too is like, just assuming that you can map out like what the Browns would have to give up, and you're like, well, it's just going to take this as a fan or whatever analyst that we could, if we're looking at what it could cost. Like, we can say that now if we're existing in a world where it's just the Browns and just the Titans, but there's 32 other teams, or 30 other teams, and the Giants aren't that far behind. Like, if they throw in, hey, we're willing to give you a little extra to get up and get Cam Ward, then the Browns have to come back to the table and say, okay, what can we kick in to trump the offer that the Giants are giving you? Like, these trade negotiations are never just like straightforward black and white, this and this. And so that's why you can't, you can use the chart as a guide, but it can't be the thing that like writes how the trade's going to end up. Because like you said, all these examples that we can go through, and there aren't any that go from 2 to 1. That's never happened in NFL history. A team goes from 2 to 1. So this will be sort of different in that way. And so we don't really have a precedent for that. But all the other ones where it's like 3 to 1 or whatever. Now, the Trubisky trade in 2017, they didn't give up a second first-round pick. So maybe that's a guide. But I also know the same article you read, he said like he didn't think the value was really what the 49ers got lesser value than what you normally would expect. So I think that maybe is an example of like, okay, this team got a better deal in this instance, but maybe that's not what the Titans would settle on or take. So you have to think about all these different things as you do this. So yes, on face value, I don't necessarily think they have to go with their first round pick, but it might take that to get it over the top. If the Giants are coming really aggressively and they're like, we want Cam Ward, you got to do what you got to do if you think he's your franchise quarterback.
100%. And that's the big factor. Like you said, in a vacuum, trading down one spot shouldn't be that expensive no matter where you're at. But you add in, and again, everything that's come out since the combine is so helpful to the Titans. Cam Ward, clear number one. Everybody in the NFL clearly has him number one. Shedeur Sanders, not good in his meetings, unprofessional, uninterested, all those different things that we're hearing about Shedeur Sanders. Like Sanders being less valuable, Cam Ward being more valuable. If Sam Darnold goes back to Minnesota, which is something that we're hearing, like all of these things help the Titans so much because there's less veteran quarterbacks to fill spots, to have leverage to say, hey, with like the Mitch Trubisky thing in that article that we're referencing from Over the Cap, the 49ers weren't certain that the Bears were going to take quarterback because they had just signed Mike Glennon in free agency. So having that veteran quarterback in place, even if you're the Giants or the Browns and you're still planning on taking quarterback, it at least gives you leverage to say, oh, well, we don't need to be desperate. We got a veteran stopgap, and you can use that to keep the price down. But if Darnold goes back and Cousins doesn't get released and, all these different things are happening and Cam Ward is clearly number one, there's only one viable quarterback that can get a fan base excited this offseason, and it's Cam Ward. And that, outside of the vacuum of one spot move, that is what makes the Browns have to pay more than Browns fans think that they should, is because it's not just, us versus the Titans in a negotiation. The Titans could say, hey, well, the Giants are more desperate than you, and the Jets and the Raiders, that is what makes it cost more than what you would think of just looking at the charts or anything. It's not just in a vacuum in a negotiation like that.
100%. We're on the same page with this. And to be clear to Browns fans watching the show, I don't necessarily think they will have to give up their first round pick to get a deal done with the Titans to move.
I don't think
just one spot. Especially with that second rounder. If they're willing to go with that second rounder this year, that's pick 33, first one of the second round.
That's a first rounder.
Yeah, it's a pseudo first rounder, right? Like it's easy for the Titans to maybe trade back up into the first round and get a player that would have a fifth-year option attached.
Yes.
So I think that's important to know. But there is always the possibility, because a lot of these trades you look at where teams moved up to one, they included a first rounder in that next year. And so that's important context to know that it could be something that has to push the deal across the finish line. If, say, a desperate Giants team or a desperate Raiders team comes calling and they're like, we're willing to offer more, the Browns might have to do something similar. So, Tyler, I appreciate you stopping by, man. This was awesome. I'm sure we'll have plenty more conversations. And now that I know that you're open for business, I look forward to talking to you about potential trade scenarios here coming up before the Locked On Drive show.
Yeah, the last thing I'll tell you before we go, though, is my phone's ringing. Oh, it's Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants. Uh-oh.
Trying to jack up the price on me.
There we go. No, all jokes aside, awesome. Our teams are in not the best places, but fun places nonetheless, and it'll be interesting to see how it all works out. But this won't be the last time that we talk this offseason. That's for sure.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Tyler, appreciate your time, man. When I come back without Tyler, I add another name to my quarterback big board for the offseason. Who is it? Find out next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, so we are back riding solo for the final segment here of the show, but I thought Tyler had some great stuff to say about what it would take to potentially move up the board, if the Titans are open for business, all those good things. And here's the thing. I agree with Tyler. Like, I want to be clear, because I got people jumping in the comments saying I'm crazy for even suggesting they'd have to give up next year's first. I'm not saying they're going to have to. It might only take this year's swapping 1 and 2, this year's second rounder, and an additional day 2 pick this year or next year or whatever. Like that could be a scenario that plays out. But these trades are never as straightforward as some of you in the comments are making it seem. That is a flat out fact. Like, every time you think like it's an overpay, whatever, that's the price is the price. And if the Titans decide to like run it up because, hey, the Giants are calling and they're willing to give up more, they're willing to give up next year's first. Are you willing to give up next year's first? The Browns are going to have to answer the bell and decide if Cam Ward's worth it to them. So that's the biggest point I'm trying to make is on the surface, no, I don't think it's going to cost them next year's first to get a deal done. I'm envisioning something more so like Tyler laid out, where it's like this year's first, this year's second, maybe this year's third, or you wait and you throw in a second next year because you don't necessarily want to give up all your top 100 picks this year, and you got those 2 third rounders at your disposal. So maybe that gets it across the finish line. Whatever iteration you want to throw together, I get it. But these deals, as I mapped out on Tuesday's show, go back in history and look at them. They're always grossly overpays. The team is always overpaying to go up because that spot is a premium to draft the quarterback that you think is the franchise is your franchise quarterback. Teams know that they can overcharge for those because you're thinking you're getting your franchise quarterback, and they know that they can gouge you. It's just how it goes. I said it with Tyler. The point value is almost always like an average of 3,000 points over what the pick is really worth, because you have to overpay. And so once you get into a bidding war, if there's other teams trying to move up, the Browns might have to end up throwing in that first rounder next year. We'll see. I hope that doesn't happen because I don't want to see them have to do that. But it could be the reality that they're faced with, just depending on how things go. But you can't just read the chart and say, well, this is all it's going to cost. I mean, look at the point value there. It doesn't always work out that way. The value is whatever the teams that are negotiating and in a given year decide that it's worth. So you can't just go off the chart and let that be the black and white answer as to what it's going to cost, because it's not 2 teams operating in a trade scenario. It is usually more teams involved here. So just keep that in mind. Like, it's never as straightforward as it seems. It's not just the Browns and the Titans doing a deal. Could be other teams involved, and that's always going to run up the price. So I'm just saying to keep that in mind. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying they are going to give up a first. I hope they don't have to give up a first. I don't think in my heart of hearts they'll have to do that to get a deal done. But if that's what ends up pushing it across the finish line, my main point from Tuesday was you got to do what you got to do if you think Cam Ward's your franchise quarterback. If it takes adding in next year's first rounder, you do it to get a deal across the finish line and get a deal done. I'm just flat out saying that's how it has to kind of, you have to go about the business of this situation if you're the Browns and you think Cam Ward is the guy. And like Tyler said, the fact that everything since the combine has been Cam Ward's the guy, he's separated himself, Shedeur Sanders isn't close, that tells you that like the price could go up for that number 1 pick if everybody's now sort of has the same thought on Cam Ward and they all want him and they all want to be able to draft him. That's only helping the Titans raise the price of what the pick's going to cost. I'm just telling you. With that said, we continue our quarterback big board here, the Locked On Browns quarterback big board. And I'm going to start doing 2 a day because that'll sort of time out nicely with the rest of this week into Tuesday, leading into free agency to kind of get through the rest of this list. But next up on the quarterback big board, we gave you Derek Carr yesterday. And before Derek Carr in the 4 spot, I had Kirk Cousins. In the 3 spot, I had Shedeur Sanders. The 2 spot, I had Cam Ward. The 1 spot, I had Matthew Stafford, who we obviously can cross off the list. No longer available. He's staying in LA. But that brings us to number 6 on the list and number 7 on the list. Number 6 on the list for me is Jackson Dart. I'm intrigued enough by what I've seen by Jackson Dart. I did a show on Jackson Dart earlier in the offseason. There's something there. I think his skill set, he sort of compared it to Jalen Hurts, which is interesting. He has that ability to run. He's maybe not the best passer, but he can make throws at all levels at different times. Maybe it's just a consistency thing for him, and his footwork does need to get better. I do have concerns about the fact that he was not asked to do much in Lane Kiffin's offense in terms of throwing the football, going through progressions. His offense is more simplified to make it easy on the quarterback to only really have to use one side of the field or go to the first couple reads. You don't have to go through all your progressions all the time. And so that's my biggest concern with Jackson Dart, I think. But that seems like something that could be coached into him by a staff like Kevin Stefanski and otherwise. And I think that Kevin Stefanski generally has an offense that sets up quarterbacks to be successful, even somebody like Jackson Dart who has some rawness to him. So I like the idea of Jackson Dart. That's our 3rd rookie to be who's on the board at this point. 3 in the first 6 spots here on our quarterback big board. And I do like him better than most of the guys I'm going to get to here down the rest of this list, which brings us to number 7, who is a guy that we talked about with Tyler a little bit, who is going to be now one of the more coveted free agent options for teams that are looking for quarterbacks. The Titans could be in play. The Giants could be in play. The Raiders might even be in play for Sam Darnold. And listen, I like the idea of Sam Darnold and Kevin Stefanski's offense. I think it would be very friendly to him. I think he could almost replicate what he did last year. And there's some reasons to be optimistic about his fit for this team. There's a couple roadblocks here. What it's going to cost to get a deal done, because he is going to command a pretty penny on the open market given what he did last year. And that's just the nature of the beast. He earned that right. The Vikings, as we now know, as of Tuesday, did not franchise tag him. So there's a chance they negotiate a new contract with him and keep him around. But it does sound like they're going to start pivoting to JJ McCarthy and let him test the waters. And I could see him ultimately ending up somewhere else, and the Vikings not paying up to keep him. So if that happens, these are all these teams that we've thrown out there are good options. And I just don't know if the Browns are going to be able to get into a bidding war given their cap situation to sign Darnold. Now, listen, there's always room in the cap. Andrew Berry always creates flexibility. It's the thing he does maybe the best. Maybe it's his best skill set. The best thing he brings to the table as a GM here for the Browns is his ability to manage the cap and not, add these void years and move money around and kick the can down the road. He's done fine with that stuff. That Bill's going to come due at some point, but he can always find room under the cap to get a deal done. So I'm not saying they're completely out of the Sam Darnold conversation, but it just seems like it would be silly for them to invest in another quarterback in that way, especially if they don't think it's the franchise guy. Like, he very much still feels like a bridge option to me, because you know what you're going to get with Sam Darnold. And I honestly, what makes me put Sam Darnold lower on this list, like 7th. I mean, he's still in the top 10 on terms of the big board, but again, you're talking about veteran options that are out there. There aren't a lot of great ones anyway. So he's higher on the list in terms of veteran options that are out there for me, but I'm still I am jaded by knowing what he did with the Jets, and I get it, it's the Jets, but also just what we saw those last 2 games he played for Minnesota. Frankly, that was the Sam Darnold that we all knew and laughed about at times. If that's still in there, if that's the guy he still is, then you kind of know what you're going to get. And I get where if you're trying to bridge the gap, that's fine. I'm just under the belief that the Browns aren't just trying to bridge the gap. To me, this feels like they are trying to find a longer term answer in the draft and bridge him with somebody else. I don't know that Sam Darnold, I don't know that you're going to pay that much for a bridge. That's why I think Kirk Cousins makes so much sense, because it's a very, very cheap way to find yourself a bridge quarterback to hopefully nurture and sort of set up a rookie for success down the line, because he's getting older and he's not going to be around much longer, and you're going to get him for $1.2 million. So given what it's going to cost for Sam Darnold, given that I think you saw he turned back into a pumpkin when the clock struck midnight, last year in the final 2 games he played and the most important games that he played. I think I'm just kind of out mostly on Sam Darnold, but not so much that I wouldn't consider him here in the top 10 on my list of quarterbacks on my quarterback big board. So I like the idea. I think he's a fine player. He clearly he's shaken off some of the egg that was on his face when he left New York and just how bad he was. And he got past that. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. I'm just not sold. Like I'm maybe more jaded than others on who Sam Darnold really is and what you're going to get out of him. But I do think he would feel like more of a safe bet in Kevin Stefanski's offense. So I'm sort of caught between a rock and a hard place with Darnold, but he winds up 7th on the list for the Lockdown Browns quarterback big board of quarterbacks that I would consider for the Browns going into next season. We will reveal numbers 8 and number 9 tomorrow on the show. Who could they be? You'll find out if you keep on listening and you make us your first listen every single day. I appreciate you joining me to talk about your favorite football team. And there's plenty more to come this week, as I alluded to. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to make sure Locked On Browns is your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft show that we got. You can also keep it local by checking out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everyday here at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.